Now, today I'm going to talk about a scenario, a situation that most people have probably seen if they have friends that are retiring, nearing retirement, and going into retirement. And that is this. Someone retires, right? They finally get the amount of service years that they wanted. They finally like, okay, it is time to retire. They file their paperwork and they go into retirement. And so they buy an RV. They start traveling for a year. They get bored and they want to go back to work. They do not like the retirement life. They want something that's going to stimulate them and really get them engaged in life. And I'm not saying that there's nothing engaging and stimulating about retirement, but for some people, they don't like it. They don't enjoy it as much as they thought they would, and they're looking to go back to work, right? So today we're going to talk about how your benefits will be affected if you want to go back to work after you've already retired from federal service. So let's get into it. And we also know that there's many reasons that people want to go back to work after retiring. Sometimes people retire and they realize that they're really not having the amount of retirement income that they expected themselves to have. And so they want to go back to work to kind of amp that up, maybe really increase their TSP a little bit, their savings, whatever it is to ramp that up. Or maybe it is just to keep busy, to stay engaged, whatever it is. We all have reasons, right? But now it's a matter of, okay, how are my pension, how are my benefits, how are my things affected if I go back to work? So let's start with the private sector. If you go back to work and you want to work in the private sector, your benefits are most likely going to be affected very, very little. The only possibility of your benefits being affected is if you are drawing Social Security and you haven't reached your full retirement age for Social Security quite yet. Because once you start making over certain amounts during that window when you're drawing Social Security but you haven't reached your full retirement age for Social Security purposes yet, you're in that window and you start making over certain thresholds, then your Social Security benefits can be reduced based on how much you're making, how much your income is. So if that applies to you, if you're in that window and you want to work for the private sector, you may want to kind of check this out, see if it's worth it. Maybe you go back to work, you start making, X amount of money, but your Social Security comes down with it. Is that worth your time? So if this kind of qualifies, if you're in this window that I'm talking about, make sure you do research, make sure you think about how that's going to affect you so that you don't just waste a bunch of time and you don't actually make any more money than you would have otherwise. And now, if you want to go back to work for the federal government, maybe in a position very similar to what you had or the same position, whatever it may be. But unfortunately, the rules and the policies for this kind of thing is not as straightforward as it would be in the private sector. So what generally happens if you were to go back to work for the federal government is that you would continue to receive your pension and all your retirement benefits, but your pay that you'd be paid from the federal government in this position would be decreased by what you're getting from your pension. This doesn't always happen. Sometimes you stop getting your pension, you just go back to work and you're just a regular employee like you were before you retired. It really depends. You're gonna have to talk to your hiring HR department for your hiring agency and see what they say and see what their policies are for your position. Often it depends on the position, how these will be handled. So if this kind of applies to you, if you find yourself in this kind of situation, make sure you talk to your potential hiring HR department to see what it might be for you. And sometimes the federal government has what they call personal service contracts, as you're probably familiar, where in this case, your retirement benefits would not be affected because these contracts really state out, okay, you're going to perform this service during this amount of time for this amount of money. And that would be a different case. That'd almost be a contractor-like scenario where then your retirement benefits would not be affected. So those are some of the options that might occur if you wanted to go work for the federal government again. But again, I would really check with your hiring HR department to make sure that applies to you in your situation. And one more thing that you're going to want to ask your hiring HR department is how they're going to handle your FEHB premiums. Because during your career, you're actually given a pretty good benefit of that your premiums for this benefit is coming right out of your paycheck. So basically, it's a tax deduction. You never have to pay taxes on that money. In retirement, however, you have to pay those premiums with after-tax money. So basically, you make money, you pay taxes, and then with whatever's left over, you pay the premiums. Where during your career, right off the top, it just paid for those premiums, and you never had to pay taxes on that money. So that's a huge difference. So ask your hiring department, say, hey, if I come back to work, how will this be handled? Can I have it so my FEHB premiums are just paid straight out of my paycheck? Because that'll save you a bunch of money, especially if you're going to be working for the government for some years. That'll save you a bunch of money in taxes over the course of that time. And again, I wish I could be more specific about how exactly it's going to be, exactly what benefits are going to be affected, but it really depends on what position you're going for and a number of things that have to do with your specific agency. So please ask them, follow up with them, see what makes sense for you. And maybe it does make sense to go back to federal government, maybe not. Maybe it makes sense to start a business or work in the private sector. Whatever makes sense for you, do the research so you know that it's going to be worth your time while you're working. Because sometimes working is just about having something to do, being engaged, having an activity, but sometimes it really is about earning more money so that you can retire completely again. Whatever your reasons are, educate yourself, do the research so you can make the best decision for you and your family, your life. So again, I hope this is helpful information. If you have any questions, please email me, call my office, whatever I could do, I'll try to do my very best. But until next time, you have a great one.